welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, the ASEAN Summit is underway in Laotian capital Vientiane, and China celebrates 25 years of fruitful ties and cooperation with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. As the group emphasizes on connectivity, what sort of role will the world's second largest economy play in the larger picture? And the G20 summit in Hangzhou has concluded, and plenty of goals and plans were outlined in the communique. Stay tuned as we speak with some of the most eye-catching VIPs of the summit on their thoughts on issues ranging from inclusive growth to global governance. And we begin today's show in the Laotian capital Vientiane, where China-ASEAN Summit is underway. This year marks the 25th anniversary of bilateral dialogue and relations between the two sides, and it is no doubt that this relationship has become a pillar of regional stability and economic growth. Let's take a look at how this partnership began and how 25 years on, ties remain stronger than ever.
Laying the cornerstone for development. 25 years on, trade between ASEAN and China is still robust and continuously surging. Today, the group sees more trades with China than any other country, and ASEAN remains China's third largest trading partner.
Our cooperation is based on mutual respect, trust, support, and mutual understanding. And this has made it possible for our relations to move forward with a great streak and to contribute to the peaceful, stable, and prosperous development of our region.
Two-way tourism boomed, educational ties strengthened. Joint humanitarian aid, disaster relief efforts, and military exercises between China and ASEAN countries were a common sight in recent years. And now, this relationship is rising to new economic heights, thanks to the regional comprehensive economic partnership.
I think there could be stronger mutual investment, China, ASEAN, better human resources, exchanges to uplift, so that finally both sides could create a stronger, bigger middle class that can create wealth for both sides.
In 1991, China was invited to attend the opening ceremony of the 24th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. This marked the start of the China-ASEAN dialogue. Then in 2002, China and ASEAN signed an agreement on comprehensive economic cooperation, agreeing to launch what is known as the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area. In 2003, relations between China and ASEAN were raised when both parties established new strategic partnership. Over the past 25 years, China-ASEAN relations have grown, matured, and blossomed, and it is with no doubt that both sides are looking forward to an even better partnership in the next quarter of a century.
And for some discussions on the relations between China and ASEAN, we have in our Beijing studio Professor Ye Hailin, who is a director of the Center of South Asia Studies at the National Institute of International Strategy, China's Academy of Social Sciences in Singapore. We are joined by Mr. Lim Tai Wei, who is the adjunct research professor at the National University of Singapore. Meanwhile, joining us in Boston, we are having Mr. Jim Walsh, research associate at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Security Studies Program. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. First of all, the G20 summit just concluded. It was a big event, and leaders from 20 G20 economies came together. Development, inclusive growth, that's the key word. Having said that, though, immediate following that, there is the East Asia Summit. How do you think some of the spirits might be carried over to the East Asia Summit, as many of those G20 economies, in fact, are also in the region? Mr. Ye.
Although not every ASEAN member is the member of the G20, but we should notice that all the ASEAN plus 6, another 6, is all 5 of them is the G20 member. So that means a lot of the participants actually directly came from Hangzhou, just like you are. So the question is that how they can bring the achievements made in Hangzhou to Vientiane and make as a continuous development. It's not only the consensus among the majority, the major economy bodies in the world, it's also the leading economy integrity mechanism in this region.
Talking about the economy, inclusive growth, that was the key word coming out of the G20. That could be abstract. This is really the occasion when it comes to East Asia Summit to implement those philosophy. So, Mr. Lim from Singapore, of course, the Singaporean Prime Minister was also there at the G20, but the question is how to implement inclusive growth in this region in the East Asia Summit platform.
I think one of the long-standing issues in ASEAN is the fact that there's a sort of a duality of economic growth between the older members and also the younger members. So the younger members include the Indo-Chinese countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam. And therefore, this inclusive growth can also be applied to ensure that integration within ASEAN is better. And since the ASEAN Economic Community was formed in December 2015, this priority becomes even more important. So here's where the ASEAN +6, especially the +6 partners, can play a role, including China, to be able to provide some infrastructure development in order to have a greater integration within ASEAN, to have better infrastructure so that integration is smoother and there is less of a gap between the older established as well as the younger members.
Mr. Yan, this is possible because the Belt and Road Initiative, mainly it is about infrastructure, it is about this region, but it has to be built on some reliable mechanism.
Of course.
Not only just infrastructure building, but also infrastructure for what? It's supposed to be about trade, isn't it?
They aim to enhancing the regional connectivity, just like what the statement made by the G20 in Hangzhou. Actually, this is a very important part for encourage the regional integrity, and they require a lot of the mechanisms, not only the capacity of the infrastructure capacity construction, but also the financial capacity, financial resources, also the policy coordination. So it's many things that require the government coordination to the private level and even to the financial level. So it means that such kind of mechanisms also provide a channel for the regional players. They can put their resources together to seeking for similar targets. So not only they require this, and also the steps they made to seeking for this purpose could bring all the regional players more closer.
Can the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN +1, +3, +6, will they be able to handle this important task? Mr. Lim from Singapore, very briefly, this time.
In the case of ASEAN, I think all members agree on a wide consensus, and the most important principle within that consensus is the fact that all respect ASEAN centrality. And from there, probably other regional cooperation can take place, and ASEAN is trying also to ensure that its relations with all +6 partners and members are of a harmonious nature, and that mutual win-win cooperation can take place.
We are going to talk about whether it's a harmonious nature or not. That is quite an issue in the region. For now, let me go to Mr. Walsh in the United States. Of course, when it comes to connectivity of trade as well, the trade mechanism is extremely important. Earlier, there was so much debate in your country about TPP. Now it seems politically difficult, at least before the election. So what would that mean when it comes to the U.S. role in terms of this year's East Asia Summit and the so-called 10+6, as we see?
Well, you know, there are always two phases to these big trade agreements. The first is negotiating them. That's what ASEAN and many countries now are struggling with, because yes, everyone wins from trade agreements, but not everyone wins at the same time, because there are winners and losers in the short term, and the losers don't like losing. So the first phase is negotiating an agreement. The U.S. was able to successfully do that on TPP, but the second phase is then going back to your home countries, particularly in democracies, and selling that agreement and getting political approval. That's where we are now with TPP. Now, in the past, these have always been difficult, whether it was NAFTA or any other trade agreement, the South Korean trade agreement. All these are difficult to get approval of, but I think that's why U.S. Political leaders are shooting for, after the presidential election, But before the new president takes office, that's the window where these sorts of things get done.
Very interesting you said over there. Of course, depends on who's going to be the president in the future, whether they wholeheartedly going to support, even if the Congress approves that. Having said that, there's another complexity going on in the region. It's not just TPP, which is coming more of a challenge to the U.S. RCEP, remember, Mr. Ye? I mean, that regional mechanism has been mentioned so many times, but where is it now?
It's go also a little bit slowly. It's left behind this schedule, but it's not much. And actually, the future of the RCEP is still very gloomy. It's not just like the TPP has faced a very crucial obstacle, but we had to notice that there's a kind of argument that now the TPP has suspended, so RCEP should go even slower to waiting for another TPP restored. There's some argument from
Do you agree with that?
Of course, I don't agree with that.
Why not?
Because the RCEP is still the ASEAN oriented, ASEAN centered. So it's not that like TPP. TPP will divide ASEAN into the different parts, TPP member or non-TPP member. But the RCEP, actually the A numbers plus 6. So it's a very comprehensive regional coordination mechanism. I think it's take the chance, should push forward.
We should give our viewers, especially international viewers, Mr. Ye, a kind of picture as to what exactly is the activities going on inside East Asia when it comes to trade. Some numbers, even between China and the ASEAN countries alone. Take a look at this. Since 1991, about 25 years ago, the trade volume between China and ASEAN increased from 7.9 billion to now 472 billion in the year 2015, making annual growth of about 19% on average, becoming more and more significant in China's trade volume on the whole, rising from 6% 1991 to 12% 2015. Of course, those are just one example as to how active the trade are between countries, China and ASEAN. But Mr. Lim, what do you think? Even though we have these beautiful numbers, the question is how to push for the next round. So is RCEP on top of the agenda for the leaders coming to the ASEAN and also the East Asia Summit?
Yes, I think many members would like to see RCEP go forward. There are important carrots that are dangling in front of all stakeholders and parties involved. And the carrots are the fact that by 2020, there is a hope for ASEAN and China to achieve bilateral trade to reach $1 trillion US dollar, and also in terms of two-way investments to reach 150 billion US dollars. So I think these important carrots are some motivation for stakeholders to push forward with RCEP. Of course, there will be issues, but the carrots appear to be quite strong incentives for this to happen. And in this process, after the formation of ASEAN Economic Community in December 2015, there is also even greater motivation to do so, since ASEAN integration, particularly economic integration, is a priority.
China and ASEAN, according to the Indonesian trade minister, could even have this huge number, $1 trillion US dollars trade 2020. We don't know when is that going to be realized, but what about that, RCEP?
I like our Singapore friends' very positive attitude, and of course I hope the $1 trillion US dollar could be reached. But we should know about the trade among the different countries. There are the two keywords. One is free, and all the numbers already indicate the importance of the free trade. Another one is fire. But I'm a little bit concerned that maybe in the future, some ASEAN countries and also some regional players, they will start talking more about the fair trade. So it's kind of another protectionism. So that's the reason why we say, okay, we could say the future is great, but now we face some problems.
Okay, Mr. Wash, earlier we touched on the issue of harmony. That seems to be an interesting word in the region. Would countries now be able to switch from the used to be geopolitical struggles and also calculations to now more focus on the real economy? After all, that's really, sir, what we really needed at this moment.
Well, I agree with that premise, but it is difficult And you're right to allude to some challenges here. You gave those big trade figures, the robust growth over the years, but the situation is changing. As President Xi said at the G20, economic growth is slowing, and there are challenges ahead. So it's a lot easier to negotiate with countries that are in different places when all the economies are growing and that rate of growth is slowing. That's a challenge. Another challenge is they're trying to negotiate a group treaty when some of the individual members do not have bilateral trade agreements, for example, India and China. That's an obstacle. And finally, and I think this is probably what you're pointing to, is that there's not only economics, there's politics. And obviously ASEAN has some problems with China in the South China Sea. And one would hope that countries can disagree in some areas and still make progress in other areas, but those things can overlap, especially if those agreements require the approval of national populations. So I think those are three big challenges that we have that we didn't have in the past.
That's right. Mr. Ye, what do you think?
I'm a little bit different from my friend, our friend.
Very briefly.
Yes, it's because of we don't have any problem with ASEAN on the maritime issue. We only have the problem with some member of the ASEAN, some country located in the Southeast Asia. And we also noticed that during this summit, China and ASEAN already make some achievement on the COES, means the unplanned encounters standard. So that means it's even for this maritime issue, we still can find a way to push forward, not only not necessarily to solve the problem, but we can control the situation.
We hope that will be the issues also on the agenda for discussion, of course, for a better and more stability in the region. Thank you so much for the three of you, gentlemen, for being with us. Ye Hailin, Jim Walsh, and Lin Tian-Wai. Really appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight, coming up in our final segment. The G20 summit in Hangzhou has concluded and plenty of international issues were brought to the discussion table. Here, what some of the highlights are as we speak with some leaders on their thoughts on issues ranging from inclusive growth to global governance. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. The G20 communique is impressive and unprecedented as believed by many. It would not become possible without the insights, hard work, and inspirations from many. During some of the top-level interviews we had during the G20 summit in Hangzhou, one could tell that it is a dynamic world that we are in today. Let's take a look back at some of those inspiring faces and hearing once again those thoughts-provoking ideas.
Sluggish economic recovery, potential volatility in financial markets, fluctuation in commodity prices, an increase in inequality and unemployment rate. Some parts of the world are still facing these threats. And against this backdrop, leaders of the G20 met in Hangzhou and adopted a communique. Transforming the global economy to one which is more innovative and sustainable is a new vision for development. Innovative growth concepts and policies will be pursued. Protectionism is condemned, and there are calls for an open global economy. The G20 communique also specifically stressed the need to include more women, youth, and disadvantaged groups in order to achieve inclusive economic growth. The global economy needs to generate more quality jobs, address inequalities, and eradicate poverty so that no one is left behind. And for the first time in G20 history, the Hangzhou summit placed development at the center of the global macro policy framework. And with these changes and plans set in place, the future of a sustainable, inclusive global economy is within closer reach than ever before.
Let's see what the world leaders are saying about how to implement those goals. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is one of the youngest among the G20 political leaders. However, when it comes to rallying the youth in political participation, he might just be the most experienced. And that's because on top of being Canada's Prime Minister, he is also the youth minister of his country. People look at your political track record. They're extremely impressed by your way of promoting the youth and also your way of gearing up enthusiasm among the youth about politics. How did that work? What is your secretive remedy?
Well, I think the first thing is young people get a bad reputation for being disconnected or cynical or not caring about politics, when the fact is, what I find is young people care deeply about their communities, about their future. They just get frustrated when they don't have ways of making their voices heard or ways of being part of shaping their community's future or their country and their world's future. So what I really realized was drawing young people into the political process was a powerful way of getting them to feel connected with their country and contribute to it. But it's also a really important way, particularly in places like Canada, where the pace of political change and navel-gazing, looking inwards is so tempting. It challenges you to take a more long-term view. You have to, if you're listening and talking to young people, you have to think about the future 20, 30, 50 years in the future. And I think bringing a more long-term vision to Western democracies is something I'm glad to do.
Mr. Prime Minister, another thing about you many are extremely interested in is why you claim yourself to be a feminist.
Well, I think that's more of a recognition and a reflection of the reality of how young people see the world right now. To be a feminist, you just have to recognize that women should have the same opportunities as men, and that there's still a lot of work to do to get there. If you can say yes to both those things, well, congratulations, you're a feminist. And for me, it's important for men.
You're not afraid of that title. You're extremely proud of it.
No, I'm extremely proud of it, and I think more men should be open about saying they're feminists, because it's not just about women saying we need more opportunities. It should be smart men saying, yes, women need more opportunities. I had a great conversation with Jack Ma just yesterday about the importance of getting more women into the workforce, getting more women into positions of leadership. Not because it's just a moral or right thing to do, but because it's better for success, to have multiple points of view. It's better for growth. It's better for everyone.
You are probably the youngest state leader among all the G20 economies, I guess, this time attending the summit, when it comes to age, but not necessarily political experiences.
You're very kind.
What does it take for politicians, do you think, to be successful, to be convincing, to be able to interact with the real people?
Well, one of the challenges of politics is it gets very, very easy to get closed off from ordinary citizens, to be surrounded by very smart people who give you solutions, and you find yourself cut off from everyday people and the challenges they live every day. You think about politics all the time. No ordinary person thinks about politics all the time. They think about their jobs, they think about their family, they think about... So for me, staying connected with people by having regular conversations, by using social media, by being open to walking down the street as much as you can.
Yeah, I saw your photo. First year when you were attending the UN conference, you were doing a yoga pose on the table. Of course, there are so many people talking about that, but what kind of message do you really want to convey through those? And also holding all those little panda cups in a way.
I think one of the things that is important about leadership is that you be authentic, that you be real, that you be the person you are. I am someone who, I love to do physical things. I love to, meet people. I love to connect. I love animals. And for me to share who I am with the people that I have the responsibility to serve, so they feel that they know me and they know my priorities, keeps me closer to them and keeps me better able to understand what they need in terms of leadership.
So are we going to have more fun photos in the future?
I certainly hope so, because I'd hate to suddenly become boring and disconnected.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The issue of development has for the very first time become one of the focal points of the G20 summit. Meanwhile, Africa's development process also for the very first time made to the discussion table at the summit. South African President Jacob Zuma happily recognized that the fact is, in our inclusive growth, he said that building up infrastructure is in fact pushing the momentum for Africa. Infrastructure project usually takes a lot of cash. I understand there has been establishment of the BRICS New Development Bank. It has been running for 1 year. Even the South African has now become the vice head of that organization. And also the AIIB, which has just started with their first board meeting, global board meeting. What do you think, Mr. President? Will these two entities provide your country with more alternatives, even the African continent?
The continent had taken a very deliberate decision to establish infrastructure that is going to connect the entire continent. And heads of states are actually leading that kind of, there's a committee that is leading that kind of infrastructure to ensure that infrastructure is there. So, but also, the question of funding will always be a challenge. So the emergence of the BRICS Bank has been one of the most important kind of happening in our society, because BRICS Bank is different from other big banks that would have stringent conditions, wanted to do, and therefore Africa and South Africa, all of us are looking at the BRICS Bank as the bank that is going to make things easier. And the BRICS itself has that understanding.
South African President Jacob Zuma. Of course, infrastructure development is one of the most important things for South Africa, but Italy has looked towards building up political momentum for economic restructuring. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has been trying to update his country's political system in order to avoid further deadlock that could stall development and growth. Let's hear what he had to say in this exclusive interview. Mr. Prime Minister, many say you are bold and brave in pushing forward the referendum likely to come in October to change the constitution so that politics in your country can move forward to catch up with the changes of the economy.
After a lot of years, finally something is changed in our country. And a new generation give a message of radical change in Italy. This message have some consequences. Just to make one example, to reduce the costs of organization of politicians, to give a message of more efficiency, a very strong fight against corruption, because I think for my country this is a great priority. And when last year we organized the Expo in Milan, we achieved an incredible result exactly because we fought against corruption with a new infrastructure in this way, led by a former judge against mafia and Camorra. So we consider important give a message of radical change. This message of radical change is a message of constitutional referendum, and I'm really confident about the intentions of Italian people to choose the future. The alternative is very clear. If we vote yes, we enter in the future. If we vote no, we continue with the same approach of the past. I think it's time for Italy to choose the future.
Europe now these days faces so much challenges. We all know Brexit. We do not know yet its impact. There's also the migrant crisis. And you got Middle East, in a way, being turned all side down. So what would that mean for Europe? Meanwhile, you've got economies in Europe suffering to a certain extent for quite a long time. And, as you said, gridlock in politics in many European countries. What would this mean for Europe?
I think Brexit could become the most great opportunity for Europe. I'm sad for the decision of our friends, our British friends, but when the people vote for leave, the people vote for leave, point, that's. So this means Brexit have to be really a Brexit, so an exit by UK from EU. And at the same time, EU could become a place more attractive, more dynamic, more energetic, but we need an attention more focused on growth and not on austerity, on investments and not on bureaucracy, on politics and not on technocrats. This is the challenge. We can use Brexit to give new energy to Europe, but we have to change the approach. More attention about growth and less than austerity.
That is Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi earlier talking to us. Crucial bilateral meetings usually take place on the sidelines of the G20 summit, and the one between China and the United States was, of course, one of the most anticipated. Chinese ambassador to the United States, Mr. Cui Tiankai, in an exclusive interview with us, suggested there could be a wonderful way for the two countries to update the global governance system together. How much do you think the meeting itself and the two leaders work together in terms of the G20 summit, this platform, like to provide the two countries with experiences of participating in the global governance together?
Well, I think this is a reunion in maybe two senses. First, it's in historic sense. Hangzhou is the place where the Shanghai Communique was negotiated.
Yeah. Premier Zhou Enlai and Dr. Henry Kissinger?
Exactly, yeah. So now, 44 years have passed, and we have had 8 American presidents from both parties. Now our two presidents are back in Hangzhou again. And this is a very good opportunity for us to review what has happened in the last 4 decades and so, and look forward to the future for the relationship.
What kind of future can we really look forward to, Ambassador Cui? You probably can go to a little bit in detail for us.
That will bring me to the other sense of reunion. This is actually a continuation of the strategic conversation between the two presidents, which they started back in 2013 in Sunnylands at the Annenberg Estate. And then they met again in Yingtai in 2014. They met again during the state visit by President Xi last year at the White House. And earlier this year, they met again on the occasion of the Nuclear Security Summit. Now they are meeting in Hangzhou. So this is really a continuation of the strategic conversation between the two presidents. And I'm sure they will give us a very clear and a strong guidance on how the relationship should move forward and how we could achieve a smooth transition from the Obama administration to the next American administration.
How smooth do you think that transition could be, given the fact we are already knowing the two possible candidates for that position? Will that add further pressure or pleasure to your job?
Well, this is a very challenging and demanding job, of course. There are always challenges, and sometimes there could be even more uncertainties. But I think that the long-term interests of the two countries will eventually determine the policies. I'm confident of that.
That's Ambassador Cui Tiankai, Chinese ambassador to the United States. The kind of confidence he said was also reflected by Mr. Zhu Guangyao, China's Vice Minister of Finance and also the deputy of the G20 financial track. China and the United States still being the two biggest economies of the world, and both, of course, are members of the G20. So many wonder, Vice Minister Zhu, whether the two countries really likely to cooperate this time, or one is likely to derail the other's efforts.
For promote growth policy and keep finance market stability, certainly we have the same goal. And we must comprehensively use monetary policy, fiscal policy, and structural policy together. Absolutely, we have same position, and we are all agree to against the currency competition, use the currency to take advantage of trade, and we also together support. We must have very close consultation on foreign exchange market. So you can see we have very broad common points. And of course, that U.S. is number one economy, China is the second largest economy. In the countryside, we need a small policy coordination too. But in G20 process, in general, we have good coordination.
Mr. Zhu Guangyao, that was the Vice Minister of Finance from China. Global challenges and inclusive growth was much emphasized in the G20 summit communique. That needs to be translated into action and change. Let's hear from two important gentlemen in the financial and also trade landscape. AIIB President Jin Liqun and Vice Minister of Commerce from China, Mr. Wang Shouwen, on how the concerted efforts of the G20 economies can make the global economy further. Earlier, I had an interview with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He was talking about Canada as the first North American country to apply to join AIIB. He said there are still many other projects that his country can work on with China on infrastructure. What is your response?
I talked to him briefly yesterday, and he said, I'm so delighted to join AIIB. And I said, we are very, very happy and very much honored to have Canada as a new member. A new member with about more than 20 other countries waiting to join the bank. And we'll try to complete the membership process by the end of this year. With Canada's participation, AIIB will be further strengthened in its efforts to promote infrastructure development in its member countries.
President Jin, what do you think it might mean for the other two North American countries?
Our position has been consistent. If the countries want to join the AIIB, particularly the systemically significant economies, certainly that will be a great plus to our institution. As you know, those countries have experience in state governance. They can provide professionals of high caliber to join the bank. And on the board, they can help enhance the governance of this institution. So the importance does not rest with the financial resources, but more important, to strengthen the governance of this institution.
You're suggesting, it seems to me, President Jin, that whoever is not joining AIIB is having a pity because their voice will not be heard.
I think you have read too much into my points. I'm saying that AIIB is willing to work with all of the countries in this world. For some reason, some countries are not members or not members yet, but we still have lots of opportunities of working together. Because the bank is transparent, is open, we practice international competitive bidding, and we have global recruitment policies. So a country could not be a member, but still participating in the international competitive bidding. Their companies can be involved in the infrastructure investment, and their nationals can join our bank as professionals.
Among the G20 economies, as we mentioned, at different development stages, and they're all facing the issue of overcapacity. And some have been accusing China of being a major player of providing the world's overcapacity. For example, in some negotiation between China and the United States. What do you make of these kinds of accusations, Vice Minister Wang?
This issue is a global issue. This issue is not emanating from a single country. This is an issue which has been there for some time in many economies. And ministers also agree that we need to have collective global action to address the overcapacity issue. As far as China is concerned, I think China has been very responsible in this regard. While some other economies were talking about reducing overcapacity, China has adopted concrete measures to reduce the overcapacity of some sectors like steel. Over the past 5 years, we cut the steel overcapacity by 90 million tons, and we have made the plan to cut further the capacity of steel in China by another 100 million tons to 150 million tons. So China has been very serious in tackling this issue, but this issue again is a global issue. it requires the collective efforts of G20 members and beyond.
Wang Shouwen, Vice Minister of Commerce, and Jin Lichun, the President of AIIB. And now let's move on to the trade side. In order to come up with practical solutions to lift a sluggish economy, the international business community came up with a policy recommendation to the G20 leaders. In an interview I had earlier with Alibaba founder Jack Ma, he told me that the future is going to be a very different one based on new technologies and the internet. What about that free trade zone? Is that going to be adopted by political leaders of the G20 summit?
Yeah, I think so. At least we're giving the official proposal to the G20 leaders for the EWTP, and we have the confidence that it will be accepted, because this EWTP is not for certain country or certain companies' trade. It is for the global young people and the small business.
You have been very keen on doing social responsibility, and many wonder, are you follow the role model of Bill Gates and many others? Is China going to have another social responsibility model like you?
Well, I think in China we have so many great people that are doing the wonderful things on philanthropy and social responsibility. It is not only a responsibility to do something, it is our passion. It is my personal passion that focuses on education and environment. And it's a great honor that in your life that you can do something that is helping people. So I think, yeah, Bill Gates, absolutely, he sort of set a wonderful role model, and Warren Buffett. There are so many great leaders in the world that we can benefit from. And China is the second largest economy today. And I do believe that more and more Chinese business leaders and entrepreneurs are going to put their money inside. It's not about money. It's about time, it's about efforts and passion.
Is the future in China of the internet going to be about Alibaba and Tencent?
No, it's going to be future for everybody. Internet is not for certain company. Internet is something for everybody.
Jack Ma over there in the G20 summit. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone from the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.